A brand new college football season, or at least a brand new college football week, is officially upon us. And because we do have a brand new week on the horizons, starting with some Friday night action that could intrigue some folks, we do have a brand new top 25 poll from Redshirt Sports, a poll that I am a proud member of, that I do vote on a weekly basis. So very excited to bring you the week 2 edition of the Redshirt Sports Top 25, the official poll of college football red zone. And I can't wait to dive into this. But before I really get into the weeds of things in terms of how it affects things from a college football playoff bracketology standpoint, as well as talking about the biggest game that we have for week number 2, there's a couple of things that I need you guys to do real quick. I see a lot of you guys tuning into the video right now, but you guys aren't subscribed. And to be honest with you, man, what are we actually doing here? Yo, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel out tremendously, and as it helps push this video out to other diehard college football fans like yourself. Plus, you have a chance to be an A1 since day one. But, you know, enough of that administrative stuff right there. Let's go ahead and dive into really the consequential movement that we had, because we had several top 10 matchups that really helped shake things up effectively, starting with the top 4 teams that do and will have a bye in into the quarterfinal of the college football playoff if the season's miraculously ended today, which I'm sure nobody is really pulling for. So for starters, Ohio State, your new number 1 team in the nation, after beating Texas, who was your number 1 team last week. We'll get to Texas in a second, but Ohio State gained the vast majority of the first place votes, 8 out of 11 to be exact. They're going to be your number 1 team in the nation. Meanwhile, the Penn State Nittany Lions, coming off of a dominant win against Nevada, they move up to number 2. LSU coming off of a big win against Clemson, and they got some more love compared to last week, moving up 5 spots. One of the major movers in this poll, as LSU now is at number 3. And then Georgia doing what they were supposed to do against Marshall. They would be your last bye team, coming in at number 4 in the country. Meanwhile, checking out how the first round games would play out, assuming that the season would end today. So we're going based off of, for automatic qualifiers, basically and essentially moving off of like who's the highest ranked team at this point. That's who we're projecting. So Ohio State would be your projected Big Ten champ, and LSU would be your projected SEC champion. Miami would come in as your projected ACC champ, as they do come off of that big time win against Notre Dame. And Miami, they do check in at number 5 in the nation. And then they would be hosting the Green Wave of Tulane, which, a little bit of a spoiler, because I am going to show you the rest of the top 25 poll in a minute. But with that being said, Tulane, while not in the top 25, they have the most points in this poll. So because they're receiving the most points out of this poll on Redshirt Sports, Tulane would be your group of 5 representative. They would be your hypothetical 12 seed, at least at this time, as the G5 representative. Miami, gotta give their flowers as well. Big time win against Notre Dame, and they were a large mover as well, moving up 5 spots, moving up from number 10 all the way up to number 5. Meanwhile, checking in on the rest of the potential first round matchups that we would have if the season ended today. The Oregon Ducks, they do come in ranked number 6, and they would host the Gamecocks of South Carolina. South Carolina coming in off of a neutral site win against Virginia Tech. Texas, even though they do have a loss on the resume, that loss is to the number 1 team in the nation. They did move down 6 spots, and it's a little bit of a big mover for among the teams that are still ranked in the top 25. But Texas would still at this time at least get a home game. They would take on the projected Big 12 champion in the Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State, of course, playing Texas last year in the quarterfinals, went to overtime. We would have a rematch of that if the season did end today. And then Clemson, we did see them lose to LSU last weekend, but they still check in at number 8, a very respectable national ranking still. recognizing that LSU was a very good team and it could swung either way, even though they do lost the battle with the true Death Valley. They would be playing against Notre Dame, who also has a ranked loss on their resume, but it is now to a currently top 5 team. So that would be your field, at least going into week number 2, hypothetically. Checking in on the rest of the top 25 poll, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that up here. So this is what we have going on. I'll touch up on Florida State in a second, but we'll talk about what we have for the rest of the top 25 in terms of notable movements. You do see that there are multiple teams no longer in the top 25. Kansas State, who did have a close neutral site loss to Iowa State to kick off the 2025 college football season, alongside nearly losing to an FCS opponent at home the very next week. So some concern brewing in Kansas State after a couple of games. So they were out. They previously checked in at number 15 in the nation. And then Boise State. Boise State came into this poll ranked number 21 in the nation. Boise State, of course, with that blowout loss against the USF Bulls. So Boise State, who was the only group of 5 team that was in this top 25, well, they are officially gone. And there was, at least right now, no G5 team taking their place within the confines of the top 25. Meanwhile, we do have 2 teams joining us. Texas Tech checks in at number 23. So Texas Tech, very happy to see them back, dominating win against Arkansas Pine Bluff. It was so bad that there was also weather delays during the second half, that they reduced the size of the quarters from 15-minute quarters to 8-minute quarters in the second half. That was really the kind of game that Texas Tech gave Arkansas Pine Bluff, which, it was supposed to be a splattering, but, Texas Tech looked sharp and did exactly what they're supposed to do. And then Alabama. Alabama was a top 10 team last week. That is obviously no longer the case. But I do want to create this caveat. And I know that this is going to be a controversial take, particularly with Florida State, who checks in at number 14. I want to start this out by saying that Florida State had the best win in week number 1. I think in terms of what expectations actually lied compared to what actually happened on the field, Florida State won somewhat convincingly against Alabama. So I definitely understand Alabama moving down the way that they did. But I do want to caution this. I do want you guys to remember that this was a team that did just finish 2-10 last year. And this was also a team that was projected to be kind of a, middle of a pack ACC team, right? The one thing that I really want to caution, and it's something that my Zeto always told me. He was a huge Eagles fan, more of an NFL guy. Loved his college sports. Was a Temple Owls fan before he passed last year. Is that week 1 was meant for observations and not for overreactions. Case in point, just thinking about what happened last year. Florida State got upset by an unranked Georgia Tech in Ireland, so that moved Georgia Tech ranked in the top 25. Shout out to the Yellow Jackets to be ranked 2 weeks in a row in this particular poll. But with that being said, Georgia Tech would go on. They would lose the very next week to Syracuse. Then Syracuse was ranked for 5 minutes. And then what ended up happening was Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Syracuse, those 3 teams, all finished the year unranked, quintessentially, right? So is it one of those situations? Is Alabama truly a lot worse than we thought? Or is Florida State a team that is actually a lot better? Or is it a little bit of a mix of both as we progress through the rest of the season? It's one game, and again, it's a really good win against in that one game. But I was actually one of the few people that also didn't put Florida State in their top 25 because I was picking between Florida State and Iowa State, to be honest with you. And I still think that Iowa State, at least for me in the eye test, I think that Iowa State is a better team than Florida State based upon, what I had them projected in the preseason and what I've seen from both teams so far. Again, Florida State has a chance to prove itself that what they did against Alabama and in week number 1 was not in fact a fluke. I know they only play against an FCS opponent in, I think it's Texas A&M. I believe that's who they are going up against. But if you're as good as what people are saying you are after this win that you pulled off against Alabama, you're going to dominate that team. And so I think we're going to get a lot of answers. And I'm not even trying to like douse the flames of Florida State by any means. That is not my intent. But I just want to like hold on to the brakes. It's been one game. Let's see how things play out, like the next week or two. And ditto for Alabama. If Alabama, what if they also struggle, this upcoming weekend against UL Monroe? Does that victory for Florida State get viewed in the exact same light? Again, I'm not trying to be an ACC hater. I'm not trying to be a Florida State hater by any means. I just want to caution things. I just want to like get on the brakes a little bit. I'm sure that's not going to create any kind of controversy on Twitter or here on YouTube. But that's where I stand. Great win for the Seminoles, and I want to make sure that is understood. A very good win for the Seminoles. Let's just wait to see how good let's see how this week plays out, and maybe even the next week plays out, before, we anoint them as a borderline CFP team. Because with this number 14 ranking that Florida State has, you're talking about them being in the doorsteps of making the playoff already. And, I just don't know if I'm there yet with them, but I do want to acknowledge that was one of the best week 1 wins that we've had all season long. Now, with that being said, in future me, who's going to edit this later tonight so that we have like a couple of videos dropping tomorrow prior to the James Madison Louisville game, as well as the NIU Maryland game. Future me, this is your endpoint for what's about to come up next. The biggest game that we have in week number 2 is number 13 Michigan, led by Sharon Moore, and we know what Sharon Moore is, being able to coach at his alma mater. Well, his alma mater just happens to be ranked as well, number 21 Oklahoma, according to our Redshirt Sports Tops 25. That is all taking place at Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium in what arguably has the highest stakes of week number 2, with this being your only top 25 game that we have in the week 2 slate. And that's going to be kicking off at 7:30 Eastern over on ABC. Michigan, listen, they seem to have signs of life, at least on the offensive side of the ball, because imagine this, they might actually be able to get a forward pass going. Can you imagine that? Imagine Bryce Underwood, coming in here in his very first game, and, it's not necessarily the most eye-popping spots, like stats, against a New Mexico team that is expected to be towards the very bottom of the Mountain West, right? But, he did throw for over 250 yards. He took care of the football. He didn't turn it over. And looks like someone that, could actually create that impact similar to what Trevor Lawrence did for the Clemson Tigers very early into his college career. That kind of impact is something that Bryce Underwood could very well have for Michigan in 2025. Now, for that being said, while the offense seems to actually have a little bit of pulse and still be able to have a little bit more balance because of the fact that they're able to pass the ball a little bit more effectively, at least that's what the early returns show. What I will say is I still thought this team looked a little shaky in week number 1. I mean, I understand that it was a 17-point win against New Mexico, but, at the same time, like, you're projected to post a blow these guys out of the water. I'm talking about like a 30 to 35 to like 40-point victory. And, New Mexico, they hung around a little bit longer than what was expected. So, this is a team that's looking a little shaky, maybe on the defensive side of the ball, which makes me wonder, even with an improved aerial attack, and in a game in which this is really genuinely a big opportunity for both teams to notch a top 25 win to help bolster that potential playoff resume. How are they going to counter against Oklahoma, who, We obviously know about John Mateer, one of the more talked about quarterbacks over the course of the entire offseason, bringing his offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle. And he seems, at least what we saw, and I know it's just against Illinois State, but he does present as a legitimate game changer for the Oklahoma Sooners. We're talking about a guy that, hey, he did amass over 3,800 yards last season between passing and running the ball, but it was a matter of, can he translate that to higher level competition? And while this specific game will probably provide more answers, because again, they did go up against Illinois State, he looked sharp, and he even looked sharp in a game where Oklahoma had a really difficult time running the ball. I'm talking about a team that, averaged less than 3.5 yards per carry against an FCS program. And to be honest, it's probably an FCS program that probably isn't going to make the FCS playoffs level, just to kind of level set how good that actual team is. So definitely some concerns there as well. Both teams really having questions, to be honest. One on maybe a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball, while as trying to figure out how legit the Michigan offense is actually going to be. While for Oklahoma, it's really, can John Mateer get a little bit of help from his running game? We figured like the defense is always going to be at least at a pretty good level with Brent Venables coaching the team, being more of a defensive-minded head coach, but not being able to run the ball against FCS program. I understand it's just one game, but I mean that is a little bit of a cause of concern. I mean we got to call a spade there, right? But hey, let's go ahead, take a quick look in the model. What does the model tell us as of right now? And it's going to be really interesting. So what we have for the model in this present moment, right about now, is that comparing the model with what our internal metrics say in terms of what FanDuel is reporting is actually pretty similar. So on FanDuel right now, Oklahoma is listed as a 5.5 point favorite, while our internal power rating metrics, it's right about on the money. We're talking about Oklahoma coming in as a 5 point favorite. So not much difference between what we're reporting and what FanDuel is reporting as well. Most of that is, baking in home field advantage because Oklahoma obviously is at home. But even if you don't bake in home field advantage, let's say this game is on a neutral site field, you're still looking at Oklahoma being really about a 1.5 point favorite. So right now we're saying that Oklahoma not only gets the benefit of a home field advantage, but is probably a slightly better team than Michigan at this time. Now, with that said, Michigan can absolutely pull this upset off if they use really the Illinois State playbook, really limit Oklahoma on the ground and force those obvious passing downs, see if John Mateer can continue to make big plays, right? Or at least, make them one-dimensional in the sense of, hey, John Mateer may still be effective, but you know what's coming, and you may do a little bit of better job of stopping him, or at least slowing him down. Because I'm not sure if he's the type of quarterback that you could absolutely box up, but maybe it's a passing game that you could slow down. With that being said, at the same time, though, Bryce Underwood, you have to understand, he's playing in his second career college football game. It's not like he's making his second start. He's playing it's his second game ever on a college football sideline. And playing in such a tough environment, and because of how Brent Venables is such a gifted defensive mind, I can see this being one of these games where it really comes down to the turnover margin. And that Bryce Underwood, makes, one too many mistakes for Oklahoma to be able to pull this out. So what I will do is I'm going to agree with the model in the sense of I do believe the Michigan Wolverines, they do end up covering. I think they do cover the 5.5 that's currently on FanDuel. But I'm not going to go so far as to give Michigan the win outright, even though they are the more highly ranked team right now on our Redshirt Sports Top 25. I do think we do end up seeing, I guess, technically an upset, but not according to FanDuel or our internal power rating metrics. I think because of that home field advantage, and I think Brent Venables does find a way to confuse Bryce Underwood enough. I think Oklahoma does end up winning this out and making this, let's say it's like a 27-23 affair in favor of the Oklahoma Sooners, really cementing themselves as a top 25 team that should be taken a little bit more seriously in the playoff discussion moving forward. But hey, that is going to wrap things up here for the Redshirt Sports Top 25 review, as well as talking about some of those, talking about that biggest marquee matchup that we have from a CFP perspective. Let me know down in the comments how you feel about the Redshirt Sports Top 25, as well as like how you think that game's going to go down between Oklahoma and Michigan. Definitely let me know down in the comment section. And if you haven't done so already, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, because that would truly warm up my cold dead heart, as well as get this video out to more dedicated college football fans like yourself. I'm your host, Jake of College Football Red Zone. I hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.